I didn't cry when the leather riding crop struck my back. The nauseating sound of leather tearing into skin echoed through the damp, windowless cellar of the historic estate in the Hudson Valley, sounding exceptionally sharp. Damon Vance's hand was steady. The heavy, genuine leather whip flew from his palm. Every strike precisely avoided my vital organs but violently destroyed my dignity and pride. Admit your mistakes, Chloe. His voice was cold and elegant, like a Supreme Court judge looking down on a hopeless criminal. I clenched my jaw. Cold sweat mixed with blood dripped down my spine, soaking the pure white silk nightgown I had worn specifically to please his tastes. The metallic taste of blood bloomed in my mouth. I swallowed the bitterness in my throat and forced myself to look up, my vision bypassing his broad shoulders to see my daughter cowering in the corner, and Peyton Pierce, who stood by the door, covering her mouth and sobbing silently. Today was Piper's 5th birthday. Just 3 hours ago, I was in a presidential suite at the Plaza Hotel in New York City, personally arranging pink balloons and a massive fondant cake for her. Damon had promised to cancel all his board meetings today to give our daughter a happy and complete birthday. But when he pushed open the double doors, he brought in not only the chill of late autumn but also Peyton, her eyes red and swollen. In Peyton's hands was a completely shredded French haute couture dress. It was a collector's item Damon had won at a luxury auction last month, claiming it was a thank you gift to Peyton for saving his life in a fire in the Hamptons 5 years ago. It was supposed to be her outfit for the corporate annual gala next week. Mrs. Vance, I know you've always been on guard against me, thinking I have ulterior motives by staying by Mr. Vance's side. You could have taken it out on me, but why did you make Piper cut this dress? This was a heartfelt gift from Mr. Vance, Peyton cried, gasping for air, her fragile shoulders trembling like a leaf in the wind. Before I could open my mouth, the back of Damon's hand struck my face fiercely. The force of the blow threw me against the table, knocking over the birthday cake. The delicate sugar ponies shattered, and the colorful frosting smeared all over my body. Piper burst into terrified tears. She threw herself forward to hug my leg, but Damon grabbed her by the collar and casually pushed her to the security guard behind him. Take her back to the guest house. I'll teach her a lesson she'll never forget. Damon's eyes were cold as a frozen lake, leaving no room whatsoever for me to defend myself. My memories were scattered by a new wave of excruciating pain in my back. The tip of the whip struck my exposed shoulder blade for the 20th time, drawing beads of blood. A drop of hot liquid splashed outward, landing perfectly on Piper's brand new white tulle dress, blooming into a glaring red stain. Mommy, don't hit my mommy. Bad daddy, you're a bad man. Piper broke free from the security guard's grip. Like a desperate little beast, she lunged forward, hugging Damon's thigh tightly and biting down on it with all her might. Damon hissed in pain, his eyebrows instantly knitting into a tight knot. He instinctively kicked his leg out. How could Piper's pitiful strength resist the force of a grown man? She flew backward like a kite with a cut string, her forehead slamming heavily against the edge of an antique oak console. With a dull thud, blood instantly welled up from Piper's pale forehead, streaming down her tear-stained cheeks and merging with the bloodstains on her dress. Piper! I didn't know where I found the strength, but I broke the ropes binding my wrists and stumbled forward, pulling my daughter tightly into my arms. My trembling fingers covered her wound, but I couldn't stop the hot red flow. Damon's movement froze in the air, the veins on the back of his hand holding the whip bulging. A fleeting flash of panic crossed his eyes, and he subconsciously took a step forward. Mr. Vance, your leg is bleeding, Peyton cried out with perfectly timed alarm, her delicate body pressed against his as she used a lightly perfumed handkerchief to cover the fabric of the pants where Piper had bitten him. Her tears fell rapidly. Piper is just a little girl. Please don't be mad at her. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have mentioned the ruined dress. I only deserve to wear cheap clothes anyway. I don't deserve your heartfelt gifts. Those words acted as a precise dose of poison, instantly extinguishing the tiny spark of guilt that had just surfaced in Damon's heart. He stopped, looking down at me from his towering height, his gaze returning to a state of disgust and cruelty. Look at the daughter you raised, Chloe. She's like a savage. Where are her manners? You'd use any low trick out of petty jealousy, even manipulating a 5-year-old child. You absolutely disgust me. My hands were still shaking. My daughter's faint whimpers were like a dull knife, slicing my heart piece by piece. I tilted my head up, looking at this man I had loved for 5 whole years. 5 years ago, to marry him, I didn't hesitate to hide my true identity and abandon my position as a senior partner at a top Wall Street investment bank. I willingly locked myself in this estate, learning to cook, learning to cater to his every whim. I thought even an iceberg would melt one day, that as long as I gave enough, he would eventually see me. But now, looking at his handsome yet cruel face, I only felt a freezing chill radiating from my very core. Damon. I heard my own voice, as raspy as sandpaper scraping across a table. There was no hysteria, only the stillness of dead water. I didn't cut the dress, and neither did Piper. You didn't even investigate. You just enacted a private lynching against me based on Peyton's one-sided story. The security cameras captured everything perfectly. Besides you and Piper, who else entered that living room? Damon sneered. 5 years ago, Peyton suffered severe burns on her back to save me from that fire. She still aches on rainy days. She's so kind-hearted she wouldn't step on an ant. Are you suggesting she cut the dress herself to frame you? The story of her saving him from the fire was a well-worn narrative. My nails dug deeply into the flesh of my palms, bringing back the sharp pain of that fire 5 years ago. The person who actually dragged him out of the burning car wreckage, the one who was burned so severely she was nearly disfigured, was me. Peyton simply passed by, picked up the necklace I dropped at the scene, and conveniently became his savior. I tried to explain once, but all I got in return was his mockery, accusing me of having ulterior motives and trying to steal someone else's credit. After that, I never brought it up again. I thought that as long as we were married and had a daughter, the past would be buried by time. But I was wrong. If you don't pull an embedded thorn from your flesh, the wound festers. The 30 lashes were over. I lowered my head, using my sleeve to carefully wipe the blood from Piper's face. Damon was struck by my disturbingly calm demeanor. A trace of irritation flashed through his eyes. He violently threw the whip to the ground, where it landed with a sharp crack. You can reflect on your actions right here in the cellar. Don't come out until you're ready to lower your head and apologize to Peyton. He turned, wrapped his arm around Peyton's fragile shoulders, and walked toward the door. Cut off all her food, water, and medical supplies. No one is allowed to visit her without my permission. The heavy iron door slammed shut with a teeth-grinding metallic screech. The sound of the lock clicking completely severed all light from the outside. The cellar was left with only a single wall sconce emitting a pale, sickly glow. "Mommy, it hurts." Piper nestled in my arms, her little hands tightly gripping my torn collar, her voice as weak as a puppy's. Suppressing the piercing agony in my back, I held her tighter. I tore the hem of my silk dress, turning it into strips to hastily bandage the wound on her forehead. "Don't be afraid, Piper. Mommy is here. After today, Mommy is taking you far away from here. We will never come back." I pressed my face against her ice-cold cheek, and my tears finally fell without warning. It wasn't because of the pain, nor the injustice. It was because of a ridiculous sense of waking up from a long illusion. I was Chloe Sterling, the youngest daughter of the billionaire Sterling family, a financial prodigy who held half of Wall Street's resources in the palm of my hand. Back then, out of a selfish notion of love, I defied my father and brothers, retracted all my brilliance, and willingly became a toothless tiger, trapped in this man's backyard. I thought that was a compromise for love. It turned out that in his eyes, I was just cheap. Blood, mixed with cold sweat, clung to my skin. The freezing air blew through the crack in the door, making my entire body shiver. In the dark, I fished a smartphone with a shattered screen out of my pocket. Fortunately, it still turned on. The screen lit up with a faint glow, illuminating my pale, ghostly face. I didn't look at the messages of fake affection Damon used to send, nor did I check the hypocritical pleasantries in the high society wives group chats. I scrolled through my contacts, my fingers stopping on a number I had kept blocked for 5 whole years. I unblocked it. I dialed. There was only a brief ring. The call was answered almost the very second it went through. From the receiver came a man's deep, resonant voice, carrying a trembling, almost unbelievable tone. "Chloe." My cracked lips moved, the warmth in my eyes fading thread by thread, leaving only bottomless ice. On the other end of the line, Bradley Sterling, the eldest son of the Sterlings, who controlled global financial lifelines, drew a sharp breath. Immediately after, there was the massive crash of a chair falling over, followed by the terrified gasps of a room full of executives. "Where are you? Who hurt you? Why is your voice so weak?" Bradley's voice rose instantly, carrying an undeniable oppressive weight and inconsolable anxiety. "Brother." I lowered my eyes, looking at the blood on Piper's dress. My voice was as light as a breeze, but every word carried a blade. "I'm done playing. The Vance family is making me miserable. I want them to disappear." The line went dead silent. Only Bradley's heavy breathing could be heard. 5 seconds later, he spoke only 2 words. Understood. Wait. Hanging up the phone, I held little Piper, who had already fallen asleep, and leaned against the freezing wall. The wounds on my back hurt until they went numb, but I felt more lucid than ever before in my life. Damon thought he controlled my life. He thought I was a canary who wouldn't even be able to buy cold medicine after leaving the Vance family. He had no idea what kind of monster he had unleashed when he locked that door today. The long night passed in dead silence. Early the next morning, the iron door was pulled open from the outside. The blinding sunlight poured in, stinging my eyes so badly I couldn't open them. Standing at the door wasn't Damon, but the Vance family butler. He held a silver tray with a document and a pen, his eyes carrying a trace of contempt and disdain. "Madam, Mr. Vance said that if you still refuse to apologize to Miss Peyton, you must sign this document." The butler pushed the tray in front of me. I squinted and read the bold black font at the top. Divorce Settlement Agreement. Below, in dense clauses, was a core condition. The female party has committed a grave fault during the marriage. She will leave with 0 assets, no alimony, and will be stripped of all custody rights over the daughter. Looking at that piece of paper, I suddenly had the urge to laugh. Damon had calculated this perfectly, thinking I wouldn't be able to bear leaving my daughter, and using this tactic to force me to lower my head. In his eyes, a dependent woman like me, once having signed this agreement, would be left homeless, forced to wag her tail and beg for mercy like a stray dog. "Give me the pen." Leaning against the wall, I slowly stood up. The scabs on my back tore open again with the movement, and hot blood trickled down. But I didn't even flinch. The butler froze for a second, clearly not expecting me to be so decisive. He hesitated before handing over the fountain pen. I decisively signed Chloe Sterling in the female party's signature box. The strokes were sharp, the force piercing the paper. Change the second clause. I threw the agreement back onto the tray, looking at him coldly. "I'm taking Piper. As for the Vance family's money, it's filthy. I don't want a single cent. If Damon disagrees, I'll see him in court." The butler felt intimidated by the gravity in my eyes and subconsciously took a half step back, nodding repeatedly. "I'll go ask Mr. Vance." 10 minutes later, Damon personally came to the cellar. He wore a dark gray, impeccably tailored suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his forehead carrying a dark and furious storm. Peyton followed behind him, holding a glass of warm water like a solicitous hostess. "Chloe, what kind of hard-to-get game are you playing now?" Damon slammed the modified agreement against the wall, leaving with absolutely nothing, dragging an injured child along. "Do you really think you can survive 3 days on the streets after leaving the Vance estate?" I bent down to pick up Piper, my gaze passing over his shoulder to rest calmly on the overcast sky outside. "It's going to rain. Whether I survive or not is my business. I won't trouble Mr. Vance with it." My tone was indifferent, as if speaking to a total stranger. This dismissive attitude completely infuriated Damon. He lunged forward, grabbing my wrist with a force so brutal it felt like he was going to crush my bones. "Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You think if you try to take my daughter, I'll cave? Let me tell you, the moment you walk out those doors today, everything related to the Vance family will no longer have anything to do with you. When the time comes, even if you kneel on the ground and beg me, I won't give you a second look." "Damon, please don't be like this." Peyton stepped forward hypocritically, trying to pull Damon's hand away. "Mrs. Vance is probably just acting out of spite. Madam, just lower your head. There's a torrential storm coming. You're injured and Piper is scared. Where could you possibly go?" Her eyes gleamed with unhidden triumph and ecstasy. As long as I left, the position of the Vance family matriarch would practically be in her pocket. I turned my head, looking at Peyton's hypocritical face, and suddenly raised my free left hand. Slap! A sharp, resounding slap viciously struck Peyton's face. She screamed, losing her balance and falling to the floor. The glass of water in her hand shattered into pieces, the water splashing all over Damon's expensive leather shoes. "What kind of trash are you to think you have the right to bark at me here?" I looked at her coldly, my gaze like a knife. That slap stunned not only Peyton but also Damon. "Chloe, are you crazy?" Damon roared, instinctively letting go of me to bend down and help Peyton up. "I'm not crazy." I rubbed my red wrist, holding Piper, and straightened my spine. Step by step, I walked out the cellar doors. "Damon, remember what you said today? Since I'm walking out the doors of the Vance family, I will absolutely never set foot here again." The cold, early autumn rain fell without warning. Raindrops the size of beans battered my face, while the blood from my back mixed with the rain and washed into the mud. I didn't hold an umbrella, nor did I take a single item belonging to the Vance family. I only had Piper, who wrapped her little arms tightly around my neck and buried her face in my collarbone. Damon stood under the eaves, staring coldly at my back, stumbling into the rain. Let her go. Notify security. No one is allowed to lend her an umbrella, and absolutely no one can lend her a car. I want to see how long her stubborn pride lasts. The man's roaring voice was shattered by the sound of the rain behind me. I didn't look back. The moment I stepped through the cast-iron gates of the Vance estate, a black armored Maybach glided silently through the curtain of rain like a quiet leviathan, stopping firmly right in front of me. The car door opened. A massive black umbrella was raised over my head, blocking the stormy sky. Wearing a custom-tailored overcoat, Bradley Sterling stepped out of the car. The financial predator, a man known for keeping his composure even if a mountain collapsed in front of him, instantly got red eyes when he saw my blood-soaked body and my pale face. He took off his overcoat, still carrying his body heat, and wrapped it tightly around Piper and me. His voice carried a rage and heartache suppressed to the absolute limit. Chloe, your brother is here to take you home. The interior of the car was filled with a faint scent of wood and leather, isolating the storm outside. Bradley didn't ask what I had been through these past 5 years, nor did he ask where the shocking, horrifying wounds on my back came from. He simply stayed silent, turning up the climate control and pulling sterile gauze from the car's mini-fridge. His movements were stiff, yet extremely careful. As he pressed it against the edges of the wounds still bleeding on my back, I turned my head to look at the city skyline flying by the window. The gray silhouette of the Vance estate had been left completely behind in the depths of the rain. Don't go to the hospital. I pressed Bradley's hand as he prepared to give orders to the driver. My voice was dry from the rain and the pain. Go to the estate in the Catskill Mountains. Have Dr. Miller bring a private medical team there. I don't want my itinerary leaving records in any public hospital system. Bradley held my freezing fingers in response. The temperature of his palm was burning. His jaw tightened into a sharp curve, the dark storm surging in his eyes, making it look like he was suppressing the urge to tear someone limb from limb. Whatever you say. His voice was hoarse. He turned and pressed the intercom button to the partition, issuing a brief command. The estate in the Catskills was a hidden property of the Sterling family in upstate New York. It covered a massive area of land, and its security level was equivalent to a bank vault. When the car pulled into the underground garage, an 8-person medical team led by the renowned surgeon Dr. Miller was already waiting by the elevator. The surgical lights flared on above us, illuminating the spacious, sterile operating room. A nurse used medical shears to cut away the silk dress that had been hardened by blood and rainwater. The moment the fabric peeled away from my flesh, it brought profound agony. I bit down on a roll of gauze, cold sweat breaking out layer by layer. Still, I didn't let out a single cry of pain. 30 whip wounds. 5 of them reached the dermis layer, accompanied by mild infection and soft tissue contusion. Doctor. Miller looked at my back, his eyebrows knitted tightly. The forceps in his hand clattered against the metal tray. Mr. Sterling, the wounds need to be debrided and sutured. Without anesthesia, a person won't be able to bear it. No anesthesia. I spat the gauze out of my mouth. My hands gripped the edge of the surgical bed so hard my nails nearly bent backward. I need to remember this pain. Bradley stood outside the glass partition, staring at my bloody back. He punched the bulletproof glass, making the entire wall vibrate. The debridement process felt like rolling in a vat of boiling oil. Saline washed away the torn flesh, and iodine burned the infected edges. I closed my eyes, my mind constantly returning to Damon's cruel face as he held the whip, and Peyton's triumphant smile hiding behind him. When all the wounds were treated and wrapped in thick, sterile dressings, I was so exhausted it felt like I had just been pulled from a lake. In the adjacent suite, the wound on Piper's forehead had also been properly bandaged. The little girl had probably cried herself into exhaustion. She was now sinking into the soft comforter, sleeping peacefully, though tear tracks still marked the corners of her eyes. I put on a clean silk robe, draped a cashmere shawl over my shoulders, and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room. The rain had stopped. The night view of the mountains stretched out below, the lights of distant towns blinking like a river of stars. Bradley handed me a glass of hot milk, then sat on the leather sofa across from me. His long legs were crossed, his fingers holding a freshly printed document. Damon Vance's corporation is preparing to go public on the New York Stock Exchange next month. This is the blood and sweat he's been preparing for 3 years. Once the IPO succeeds, the market value of Vance Enterprises will quadruple, and he'll completely solidify his place at the top of the American business circle. Bradley tossed the document onto the coffee table. The sound of the paper sliding was exceptionally clear in the quiet room. How do you want him to fall? I held the milk, the warm glass comforting my freezing palms. The higher you climb, the harder you fall. I blew on the hot milk and took a sip, my gaze landing on the bold black letters on the front page. Vance Enterprises IPO Prospectus. Brother, the lead bank handling the Vance IPO review on Wall Street is Morgan Bank, right? Bradley raised an eyebrow, a flash of admiration crossing his deep eyes. Your intelligence network remains as sharp as ever. The current CEO of Morgan Bank happens to be your sister-in-law's younger brother. Cut off his cash flow. I placed the glass on the table and tapped the glass top lightly with my fingertip, making a dull sound. Damon has leveraged all the premium assets of Vance Enterprises with the banks for this IPO, signing massive valuation adjustment agreements. As long as the IPO process is stalled and the capital chain breaks, those institutional sharks and speculators on Wall Street who smell blood will rush in like piranhas and devour Vance Enterprises alive. That's just the appetizer. Bradley pulled a fountain pen from his suit pocket and drew a massive red X on the cover of Damon's prospectus. The nib tore the paper. Before the market opens tomorrow morning, I'll dump 30% of Vance's circulating shares onto the secondary market through the Sterling family's offshore accounts. He likes being at the top. I'll let him taste what it's like to fall from the clouds straight into the mud. Brother, don't let him fall too fast. I looked up, my eyes so calm there wasn't a single ripple. I want him to watch helplessly as the things he treasures most turn to ashes in his own hands, one by one. Early the next morning, a massive earthquake shook the New York business sector. Inside the CEO's office at the top of the Vance Enterprises skyscraper, Damon smashed his antique porcelain coffee cup against his mahogany desk. The brown liquid splashed all over the financial reports scattered on the floor. What did you say? Morgan Bank unilaterally halted the IPO review? Damon slammed both hands on the desk, his tie loosened, his eyes red from staying up all night. Standing in front of him, the CFO was sweating profusely, the hand holding the tablet shaking like a leaf. Morgan Bank responded that they received an anonymous tip that Vance Enterprises has severe financial fraud and fraudulent asset collateralization. The SEC has officially intervened to investigate. Until the investigation is concluded, the IPO process is indefinitely frozen. Our books are spotless. Where is this financial fraud coming from? Damon roared. Go investigate. Find out who made the anonymous tip and contact Mr. Davis at the bank immediately. Get that $300 million bridge loan due next month extended for another 3 months. The CFO swallowed hard, his voice on the verge of crying. Mr. Vance, Mr. Davis just blocked your number. Not just him. All the banks we normally have good relationships with issued internal memos this morning, freezing all new credit lines for Vance Enterprises entirely. Furthermore, a massive number of speculators suddenly flooded the secondary market, insanely dumping several of our core stocks. It hasn't even been 10 minutes since the opening bell, and trading has already been halted by circuit breakers. Damon looked as if all his strength had been sucked out of him. He collapsed into his executive chair. How could this happen? Everything happened too fast, too precisely. It was as if a giant, invisible hand had grabbed Vance Enterprises by the throat overnight. At that moment, the office door opened. Peyton walked in holding a cup of artisanal espresso. Her face bore exquisite makeup. She wore an incredibly expensive haute couture dress and walked in stiletto heels, her silhouette swaying. Damon, don't work so hard. Have some coffee to compose yourself. She approached sweetly, trying to touch Damon's shoulder. Get out of here. Damon, frustrated and frantic, slapped her hand away. The cup fell to the floor, the liquid staining the expensive Persian rug. Peyton froze, her eyes instantly turning red as she bit her lower lip with grievance. Damon, you're yelling at me because Chloe left. You're taking your anger out on me. But she was so ruthless when she left, taking even Piper with her. She doesn't care about you at all. Those words stepped perfectly on Damon's landmines. He took a deep breath, suppressing the vicious fire in his chest, and pinched the bridge of his nose. Sorry, the company has hit a rough patch. Go home for now. Don't bother me at the office for the next few days. Looking at Damon's exhausted face, a trace of calculation flashed in Peyton's eyes. She knew Vance Enterprises might be in trouble, but in her eyes, Damon was omnipotent in America. What problem could he not solve? The priority now was to solidify her status as the lady of the house while Chloe was out of the picture. I won't get in the way of your work, but Piper's kindergarten has a parent-child event next week. Since Chloe isn't here, I want to go to the mall to buy some new clothes for Piper. I can also pick up a few looks for myself, since you're taking me to that gala next month. Peyton lowered her head submissively, her voice soft and sweet. Damon had no time to deal with such trivial matters. He casually pulled out an unlimited black card and threw it on the desk. The passcode is 6 zeros. Go buy whatever you want. A wild joy flashed in Peyton's eyes. She grabbed the card, turned around, and left the executive office. At 3:00 p.m., inside a luxury shopping center in Manhattan, New York's #1 high-end retail destination, I wore a wide-brimmed sun hat and sunglasses, dressed in a loose linen dress that perfectly hid the wounds on my back. Piper wore a cute beanie that covered the bandages on her forehead. After a night of rest, the little girl was in much better spirits. I brought her out to pick some new seasonal clothes and get some fresh air. As soon as we reached the entrance of an elite French children's boutique, Piper let go of my hand, ran to the display window, and pointed at a hand-embroidered velvet princess dress. Her eyes sparkled. "Mommy, that dress is so beautiful. It looks like something a fairy tale princess would wear." I walked over, about to ask the saleswoman to get the dress for her to try on, when the sharp, piercing sound of high heels clicking against the marble floor came from behind me. It was accompanied by a strong scent of cheap perfume. "Wrap that dress for me, and those coats over there. Wrap them all in a size 6. I could recognize that voice with my eyes closed. I slowly turned around. Peyton stood in the store, arrogantly holding 7 or 8 shopping bags from luxury brands. Behind her were 2 mall assistants tasked with carrying her things. When she saw Piper and me, the expression on her face was first of shock, which quickly transformed into unhidden mockery and triumph. Well, if it isn't Chloe." Peyton took a step forward in her high heels, her gaze scanning up and down my unbranded linen dress before letting out a sneer. How does someone who left the Vance family with absolutely nothing have spare cash to stroll around a place like this? With the clothes here, even if you wash dishes for the rest of your life, you couldn't afford a single sleeve. Sensing the awkward tension, the saleswoman stood uncomfortably to the side. Piper, terrified, hid behind me, her little hands tightly gripping my dress as her voice trembled. "Mommy, bad woman." I gently stroked Piper's hand to calm her down. Then I took off my sunglasses. My gaze, sharp as a blade, scraped across Peyton's heavily powdered face. "Peyton, it seems yesterday's slap still hasn't taught you how to act like a human being." My tone was flat, not even bothering to grant her an ounce of anger. Peyton felt a chill under my gaze, but feeling the black card in her purse gave her renewed confidence. She took a step forward, snatching the velvet dress the saleswoman had just taken down. She raised her chin. "Chloe, stop putting on airs. Do you think you're still the all-powerful Mrs. Vance? Right now, you're nothing but a homeless stray. I like this dress, and I'm spending Damon's money to buy it. What does that have to do with you?" Saying that, she slammed the credit card onto the checkout counter with a loud smack. "Swipe the card. Wrap up every single one of the most expensive children's clothes in this store. Even if I use them as floor rags at home, I won't leave a single piece for this little nuisance to wear." The saleswoman looked at me in a difficult situation. Then she looked at the card in Peyton's hand. She hesitantly picked up the barcode scanner. "Go ahead and try to swipe it." I crossed my arms and spat the words out coldly. Peyton laughed sharply, as if she had just heard the funniest joke in the world. "Who do you think you are to give orders here? Cashier? Swipe it. If it doesn't go through, I'll file a complaint and have your manager fire you." Just as the saleswoman was holding the card, hesitating, hurried footsteps echoed from outside the store. The general manager of the mall, accompanied by 4 or 5 burly security guards in black suits, ran into the store, sweating profusely. Upon entering, the manager didn't even stop to catch his breath. He ignored Peyton entirely and walked straight toward me, lowering his head in absolute panic and submission. "Miss Sterling, I apologize. We received the notice from the board, but we didn't know you would be honoring us with your presence today. Our security protocols were inadequate, and we allowed you to be disturbed." The entire children's boutique fell dead silent. Peyton's hand, which had been pointing at the card, froze in the air like a duck suddenly grabbed by the neck. She stared in disbelief at the mall manager, a man whom normally even Damon Vance had to show some respect to now bowing to me like a humble servant. What did you just call her? Miss Sterling?" I raised an eyebrow slightly. The manager broke out in a cold sweat. "Bradley Sterling, the head of the Sterling family, personally called to inform us that his youngest sister had been disrespected in our mall. The Sterling family owns 60% of the shares of this mall's properties. Miss Sterling is our boss. It is our failure that we didn't remove irrelevant and strange personnel." The manager wiped the sweat from his forehead. My gaze bypassed the manager and landed on Peyton's twisted, shocked face. The corner of my mouth curled into a cold arc. Peyton, didn't you just say you were going to buy these clothes to use as floor rags? I walked slowly toward her. Every time my shoes hit the floor, it sounded like a heavy hammer striking against her heart. How? How do you know, Mr. Harrison? You're sleeping around on the side, Chloe. Before Peyton could finish her sentence, slap. I raised my hand and delivered a solid, resounding slap to her face. I used all my strength for this one, showing absolutely no mercy. The sharp sound of flesh colliding echoed through the quiet store. Peyton let out a scream, completely lost her balance, and fell heavily into the pile of expensive clothes. Half of her face swelled instantly, the 5 red finger marks shocking to see. A trace of blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, her exquisite makeup ruined. Watch your mouth. I looked down at her, as if looking at a pile of rotting garbage. That slap is for your insolence and for scaring my daughter. You hit me. I'm going to tell Damon. You're dead meat, Chloe. Peyton clutched her face, screaming and thrashing on the floor like a tortured soul. I sneered, pulling a wet wipe from my purse and methodically wiping the right hand I had just used to hit her. Mr. Harrison, I threw the used wipe into the trash can. Awaiting your orders. Miss Sterling, the manager stood at attention. Take down the number of the card this woman is holding. I pointed at Damon's card on the floor. From this moment on, the owner of this card and anyone affiliated with his accounts are blacklisted from all commercial properties owned by the Sterling family in America and globally. They are not allowed to take a single step inside. As for the clothes she just touched, I paused, my gaze scanning the expensive fabrics. They're dirty. Burn them all. Send the invoice directly to the CEO's office at Vance Enterprises. Without another word, the manager waved his hand. Did you hear that? Throw this woman out. 4 burly security guards immediately stepped forward as if dragging a pig destined for slaughter. They grabbed Peyton by the arms, dragging her outside. Let me go! Do you know who I am? I'm Damon Vance's woman. Chloe, you! Damon won't let you get away with this. Peyton's screams attracted the stares of countless shoppers. Under the public eye, the assistant who used to brag using Damon's name was violently thrown out the main doors of the mall like a stinking bag of trash. I turned around, took Piper's hand, and pointed at the velvet dress in the window. Baby, go try it on. If you like it, Mommy will buy the whole store for you. That night, in the office at the Catskills estate, the heavy soundproof oak doors were pushed open. The man who walked in wore an impeccably tailored silver-gray suit. Gold-rimmed glasses rested on the bridge of his nose. He carried a heavy black briefcase, his entire aura radiating a cold, unapproachable strictness. Richard Sterling, the second son of the family, a senior partner at an elite law firm, the undefeated myth of the legal world. As long as he took a case, no plaintiff or defendant ever walked away unscathed. Richard. I looked up from behind the desk and set my coffee aside. Richard didn't say a word. He walked to the desk, slammed the black briefcase down hard, unzipped it, and pulled out 3 thick stacks of documents. Everything you asked for is right here. Richard's long fingers tapped the top pile, the eyes behind his glasses flashing with a cold metallic gleam. I stripped Vance Enterprises bare. I pulled the top file and opened to the first page. It was an internal investigation report on the fire that occurred at the beach house in the Hamptons 5 years ago. That fire wasn't an accident caused by faulty wiring. Richard pulled out a chair and sat down, crossing his hands over his knees. I checked the fire department dispatch records from that year and the private insurance claims. The fire was caused by a gas leak in the kitchen meeting an open flame. 3 hours before the incident, Peyton Pierce, as the assistant in charge of maintaining the house, signed for the delivery of a new gas cylinder. Security footage shows that when she left, the back window in the kitchen was open, and the wind direction that day was blowing directly toward the stove. My fingers, which were turning the pages, tightened violently, crumpling the paper deeply. You're saying the fire that almost cost Damon his life was orchestrated by her? I gritted my teeth, the words squeezing from the depths of my throat. Not entirely. In the beginning, she probably just wanted to create a small accident to injure Damon slightly, giving her the chance to play the savior heroine to climb the social ladder. But the fire got out of control. Richard opened the second file. These are Peyton's private bank statements over the last 5 years. Damon, under the pretext of repaying his savior, transferred nearly $10 million in cash into her name, not including real estate and luxury goods. But Peyton is smart. She laundered this money through underground brokers and transferred it to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. And here is the best part. Richard unlocked a tablet and slid it toward me, regarding the shredded haute couture dress. The screen showed a slightly blurry security video. The angle was hidden, probably a hidden camera installed in the estate's storage room by some maid. In the footage, Peyton held a pair of scissors, maniacally shredding the priceless dress. As she cut, her face bore a chilling, almost psychotic smile. After shredding it, she shoved the pieces into a bag, took a deep breath, and violently pinched her own thighs to create several bruises. Then, she forced out tears and walked out of the frame. I stared at the twisted face on the screen. It was this woman who used such a clumsy, laughable trick to get my daughter's forehead cracked open on her birthday and made me take 30 lashes to the back. Damon Vance. This is the savior you bet your entire life and fortune to protect. This is your true love for whom you personally nailed your wife to the pillar of shame. Irrefutable evidence, intentional assault, corporate embezzlement, forgery, money laundering. With all these charges combined, I can make Peyton sew uniforms in a federal penitentiary for the rest of her life. Richard adjusted his glasses, a cold gleam passing through the lenses. As for Damon, for harboring a criminal, if we dig deep into his tax evasion issues, I can throw him in the slammer for a few years too. No rush. I copied the security video to an encrypted flash drive and curled my lips into an icy smile. Sending him to prison is too easy for him. I want him to watch wide awake as the business empire he is so proud of turns to dust. I want him to personally peel off Peyton's fake skin and realize what a disgusting worm he spent half his life loving and protecting. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the dense New York night. Second brother, find someone smart. Accidentally leak this security video and Peyton's offshore embezzlement statements onto Damon's desk. Make sure he thinks he investigated and found it out himself. Only when he peels back the layers on his own and realizes he's a complete and absolute idiot will the pain multiply exponentially. I want him to personally pull out the knife he plunged into my flesh and bury it into his own heart. 3 days later, inside the Vance Enterprises skyscraper, Damon paced frantically through his office like a caged beast. The corporate accounts were entirely frozen. Employee salaries couldn't be paid, and suppliers were holding protest banners in the lobby demanding payment. In just a few days, he looked haggard, aging 10 years overnight. He walked to his desk, frantically trying to find a contract he could use for a collateral loan in the messy piles of paperwork. As he flipped through the documents, a plain, unmarked manila envelope slipped out. Damon frowned. Security was so tight, who could have placed an envelope directly on his desk? He opened it. Inside was a stack of photos and a small black flash drive. The first photo showed Peyton wildly gambling at a VIP high roller table in Las Vegas, mountains of chips piled in front of her. The second photo showed Peyton in an intimate pose with a blonde man at a vacation villa abroad. The man was holding the keys to the limited edition sports car Damon had given her. Damon's pupils contracted sharply, his breathing stalling. With trembling hands, he plugged the flash drive into his computer. The screen lit up, and the storage room footage played, accompanied by clear audio. Peyton's actions of shredding the dress, her psychotic smile, and the entire process of her pinching her own thighs to pose as a victim. That acted like a sharp iron hammer, smashing Damon's taut nerves blow after blow. Crash. The mouse in Damon's hand fell to the floor, shattering into pieces. The blood in his body seemed to flow backward in that moment. A piercing, icy chill rose from the soles of his feet straight to his brain. That was the reason he took a leather whip and lashed Chloe 30 times to avenge Peyton. That was the catalyst that made him call his own biological daughter a savage and leave Piper with a bleeding head. Fake. This is impossible, Damon muttered to himself, but his logic ruthlessly told him that the crazed woman in the video was indeed Peyton, and the transactions on those bank statements were all diverted directly from Vance Enterprises accounts under absurd pretexts. An incredibly absurd thought exploded in his mind. If even the shredded dress was a self-directed act by Peyton, what about the fire 5 years ago? That woman who kept saying she was covered in scars to save him, was she really his savior, or a complete and absolute fraud? He remembered Chloe's desperate yet calm eyes in the cellar. He remembered her words, "I don't want a single cent." Intense remorse gnawed at his heart like a venomous snake. He ran out of his office like a madman. He had to find Chloe. He had to clear all this up. At the Chase Private Wealth Management Center on Wall Street, this location received only elite VIP clients with 8-figure assets and above. The front doors utilized a bulletproof glass dual authentication system, requiring fingerprints and an iris scan. Damon's Bentley braked sharply right in front of the bank, tires screeching against the asphalt. He threw open the door and stumbled blindly toward the entrance. He had just discovered that Chloe had a joint account at this bank that had long been closed. It was the only lead he could find. "Sir, please stop." This is a private VIP area. Two burly security guards stood like iron towers in front of the glass doors. Damon's eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a madman who had lost all reason. Get out of the way! I need to see Chloe. She's in there, isn't she? Let me in. Apologies. Without an appointment or VIP status, you cannot enter. The security guard coldly adjusted his sunglasses, blocking Damon unceremoniously. Damon tried to force his way in, but one of the guards easily pinned him against the wall with an immobilization hold. His cheek was pressed against the cold marble. Exactly at that moment, the heavy bulletproof glass doors emitted a soft beep and slid open slowly. Wearing an impeccably tailored black overcoat and shiny Louboutin heels, I walked out slowly, flanked by 5 or 6 bank executives and private wealth advisors. The CEO of Chase Private Wealth personally held the glass door for me, bowing slightly, his tone extremely respectful. Miss Sterling, the $300 million in your frozen accounts have been fully unblocked and the offshore clearing is complete. As per your instructions, $500 million will be used at 3:00 p.m. today to precisely cut off Vance Enterprises' last credit line with commercial banks. I, wearing my sunglasses, nodded expressionlessly. Thank you for your hard work, Chloe. A hoarse voice carrying a heavy metallic tone came from the side. I stopped and turned my head. Damon was pinned against the wall by security, his suit messy, his hair disheveled. Those eyes of his that were once so unbearably arrogant were now bloodshot and filled with shock. He looked at me, his gaze shifting from the trembling bank executives behind me to my cold face. 500 million, cutting off credit lines. Those phrases acted like steel needles, piercing Damon's last shred of illusion. He finally understood that the giant hand suffocating Vance Enterprises was none other than the wife he had locked in a cellar and whipped 30 times. Let him go, I ordered lightly, my voice not loud but carrying an undeniable oppressive weight. The security guards immediately let go and stepped aside. Damon's legs gave out, and he almost fell to his knees. He stumbled toward me, reaching out, wanting to grab my sleeve. Chloe, please. Let me explain the dress. I saw the video. Peyton. She lied to me. I wronged you. I know I messed up. Forgive me. It's okay. Let's get married again. I'll kick that woman out of New York immediately. His voice was full of pleading, his posture pathetic to the absolute extreme. Looking at him like this, I didn't feel a single ounce of pleasure. Instead, I felt immense disgust. Don't touch me with your dirty hands. I took a half step back, my eyes looking at him as if he were a piece of infected trash. I slowly took off my sunglasses, staring directly into his fear-filled eyes. Damon, did you really think just because you found out Peyton cut the dress, it meant you weren't a complete idiot? I curled my lips coldly, my voice cutting his eardrums like a razor blade. That was just the appetizer. Go back. Guard your crumbling company well, because next, I'm going to crush your bones inch by inch. I turned around and, surrounded by the executives, walked toward the waiting Rolls-Royce Phantom, leaving Damon with only an absolute and resolute view of my back. Behind me came Damon's desperate roar, sounding like a wild beast trapped in a snare, slowly bleeding. Back at the Catskills estate, the night was shattered by a sudden, violent autumn storm. Hunter Sterling, the third brother, leaned against the black and white marble bar in the living room, a lit cigar held between his fingers. He was the mastermind behind the country's largest media conglomerate, holding the power of life and death over countless celebrities and elites. With a single word, he could turn social media trending charts upside down. Seeing me walk in, he slid a tablet across the counter toward me, a layer of frost settling in his eyes. The financial reports and offshore accounts Richard found are too boring. The public wouldn't understand. To deal with a man who values appearances like Damon, we have to stick the knife right in his jugular. I lowered my eyes to the screen. It was an audio file paired with the dark security footage from outside the cellar. The footage didn't capture the actual abuse, but the sound of the leather whip tearing flesh echoed with a nauseating, crystal-clear crack that made one's scalp tingle. Accompanying the whipping was Damon's chilling voice. Take her back to the guest house. I am executing family discipline. Immediately following was Piper's heart-wrenching crying and Peyton's fake melodramatic pleading. This mere 3-minute video had already surpassed 80 million views across all major social platforms and was multiplying at a terrifying rate. 7 out of the 10 trending topics had red urgent tags next to them. Vance CEO, private lynching, NY billionaire abuses wife and 5-year-old daughter, manipulative assistant fake savior. The public relations department of Vance Enterprises is paralyzed. Hunter tapped the counter indifferently. They tried to spend money to suppress the topics, but the servers across the entire internet are under my control. Forget removing the hashtags. Right now, they can't even post an official apology statement. Once the fire of public opinion starts burning, the very foundation of Damon's proud corporate empire will turn to ashes. I picked up the glass of ice water next to me and took a sip. The freezing water slid down my esophagus to my stomach, suppressing the last ripple of emotion in my heart. Let the fire burn higher. I placed the glass on the table, the glass clinking sharply against the marble. Release the news that he's pledging his shares to save the market tomorrow. I want the retail investors of Vance Enterprises to trigger a selling stampede the exact second the market opens tomorrow morning. Hunter curled his lips into a smile and snapped his fingers. As you wish. That night, no one in the New York business world slept. Early the next morning, the doors of the boardroom at the top of the Vance skyscraper were violently pushed open by several gray-haired board members. Damon was slumped in the CEO chair, his chin covered in stubble, his tailored suit wrinkled and sticking to his body. An entire night of phone calls, bombardments, and bank collections had drained every ounce of his pride. Crash. A heavy crystal ashtray was smashed right at Damon's feet. Glass shards flew everywhere. Damon Vance, look at what you've done. The largest shareholder of Vance Enterprises, who was also Damon's uncle, pointed at his nose and cursed furiously. Because of your unpresentable mistress, Vance Enterprises shares opened limit down. Billions in market value evaporated entirely in half an hour. The banks cut our credit. Suppliers are blocking the lobby demanding money. You've destroyed generations of the Vance family's blood and sweat. Uncle, I'll find a way to raise the money. Damon's voice was hoarse as he tried to explain. Raise money? What are you going to use to raise it? The shares in your hands are worth less than toilet paper now. The old shareholder slammed a heavy joint resolution onto the table. The board of directors has voted unanimously to remove you. Pack up, get out of this building right now, and go fix the mess you created. If Vance Enterprises goes bankrupt, I will hold you solely responsible. Looking at the resolution stamped with bright red seals, Damon's Adam's apple bobbed with extreme difficulty. He had lost. He had lost deeply and entirely, without any ability to fight back. He walked out of the Vance skyscraper like a walking corpse. He was met head-on by the cameras and microphones of countless reporters. Security guards fought desperately to escort him to a car. Outside the window, furious investors threw rotten eggs and garbage at him. The sticky yolk ran down the windshield, blocking all his vision. Returning to his private mansion in a gated community, Damon pushed open the door and came face to face with Peyton, who was holding two large designer suitcases, looking panicked and ready to leave. Seeing Damon's ruined state, a flash of disgust crossed Peyton's eyes, but she quickly covered it up with fake tears. Damon, you're back. It's chaos outside right now. The reporters are like crazy people. Let's go abroad to hide for a while. It'll be okay. We'll come back when the storm passes. She spoke while trying to grab Damon's hand. Damon looked down, his gaze falling on her slightly open suitcase. It was stuffed with stacks of dollars, gold bars, and the emerald jewelry that originally belonged to Chloe. The corners of Damon's mouth twitched, letting out a tragic, chilling laugh. He suddenly lunged forward, his hand viciously gripping Peyton's throat, pinning her entire body against the cold wall. His knuckles turned white from the excessive force. You liar! You destroyed my company, destroyed my life, and now you want to take my money and run? Damon's eyes were crimson, like a beast forced into a dead end. The veins on the back of his hand bulged. Peyton's eyes rolled back as she was choked. Her hands desperately scratched at Damon's arm, her legs kicking wildly in the air. Save me. She squeezed broken syllables from her throat. Just as she was about to suffocate, Damon let her go, throwing her aside like a piece of rotting, stinking meat. Peyton collapsed into a puddle of mud on the floor, clutching her throat and coughing violently, greedily gasping for air. Damon crouched down, grabbed her by the hair, and forced her swollen face up. You caused the fire. You cut the dress yourself. You lied to me for 5 whole years. You made me personally beat and drive away the person who truly saved me. He raised his hand and slapped Peyton's face continuously left and right, delivering more than a dozen solid, brutal slaps. He beat her until the corners of her mouth tore open and she spat out broken teeth mixed with blood. Drop the money, go to the basement. Without my orders, if you dare take 1 step outside this house, I will break your legs. Damon kicked the suitcases, grabbed Peyton's passport and phone, turned, and stumbled upstairs. He had to go raise money now. He had to beg the rivals he had once stepped on. Even if he had to get on his knees, he had to save Vance Enterprises. Late that night, in the damp, freezing basement, the air smelled of mold. Peyton cowered in the corner, her cheeks swollen like balloons. She gnawed on her torn nails, her eyes filled with a venomous, toxic resentment. She knew Damon was finished. If she stayed here, she would end up being eaten alive by his debt collectors. She needed to get her hands on a massive sum of money and flee New York without a trace. Using the dim light in the corner, she pulled a disposable burner phone from the lining of her bra. She used it to contact underworld channels. She dialed a number, her voice filled with the madness of a desperate fugitive. "Scar, help me pull off a big job. I want to kidnap someone. When it's done, I'll give you $2 million. A harsh laugh came from the other end. "Miss Pierce, the whole of America is looking to give you trouble right now. Your job sounds pretty risky. Cut the crap. The target is a 5-year-old girl, Chloe Sterling's daughter. She left with nothing. She definitely doesn't have many security guards around. Once we grab that brat, Chloe has more money than we could ever want." Hanging up the phone, a twisted curve formed at the corner of Peyton's mouth. "Chloe, you backed me into a corner. I'll make you taste a pain worse than death." The following afternoon, the rare sunlight in New York's recent gloom finally broke through the clouds. I arranged for the medical team's private car to take Piper to a private hospital in Manhattan for a checkup on her forehead wound. To keep a low profile, I didn't use the Sterling family convoy. There were only 2 seemingly ordinary black SUVs acting as front and rear escorts. As the cars turned onto a narrow one-way street, a heavy truck loaded with steel bars suddenly made a hard turn in front of us. The screeching sound of brakes tore through the sky. The massive body of the truck instantly blocked the entire road. "Madam, we have a situation." The Sterling family's shadow guards in the front seat quickly drew their weapons, their eyes vigilantly scanning the surroundings. Behind us, 2 gray vans with fake plates surged forward, completely sealing our retreat. The doors slid open with a crash, and more than a dozen thugs wearing ski masks and holding iron pipes and machetes poured out like a wave, frantically smashing the windows of our cars. "Protect the madam and the little miss." The shadow guards pushed open the doors and engaged the thugs in hand-to-hand combat. The sound of fists hitting flesh and bones breaking echoed through the narrow street. I pulled Piper tightly into my arms and pressed the emergency panic button inside the car door. At that moment, a smoke grenade rolled through a crack in the shattered window. Thick white smoke instantly filled the cabin. The acrid smell made my eyes water and made it hard to breathe. A rough, calloused hand reached accurately through the smoke and grabbed Piper's arm. "Mommy!" Piper screamed, grabbing my clothes. "Let her go!" I pulled a tactical dagger from my boot and buried it viciously into the back of the man's hand. The man let out a muffled grunt but didn't let go. Instead, he gave a hard yank, violently tearing Piper from my arms. "Miss Sterling, if you don't want your daughter to lose her life, stay put," a harsh voice sounded in the smoke. Immediately after, the van's engines let out a deafening roar. The tires squealed on the asphalt, leaving a smell of burning rubber as they fled at high speed. When the smoke cleared, 2 shadow guards lay on the ground, covered in blood. My arms were empty. Only one of Piper's little leather shoes had been left behind. I gripped the dagger so tightly the blade cut into my palm. Blood dripped onto the little shoe drop by drop. There was no fear or panic. A freezing, absolute killing intent crawled up my spine, spreading inch by inch through my entire body, completely freezing whatever humanity I had left. 3 minutes later, Bradley's helicopter landed at the end of the street. I bent down, picked up the little shoe, and walked to the helicopter with a completely expressionless face. I spat out a heavy breath smelling of blood. In 5 minutes, I want to know the flight path of even a single fly leaving New York. Bradley looked at my bleeding palm, his eyes terrifyingly dark. He pulled out a radio and issued the Sterling family's highest-level kill order. Initiate protocol blackout. Lock down every road, port exit, and airport in New York. Deploy the 3 mercenary squads currently resting, fully armed. Drop them into New York. As the helicopter navigated through the clouds, the phone in my pocket vibrated. It was a video message from an unknown number. Clicking on the video, the setting was an abandoned shipyard, waves crashing against rusted metal. Piper was tied to a broken wooden chair, a towel stuffed in her mouth. Her big eyes were filled with terrified tears. Peyton's face, loaded with cheap makeup, appeared on the screen. She was playing with a sharp box cutter, the tip casually tracing the edge of Piper's delicate cheek. "Chloe, do you see your precious baby?" Peyton laughed like a deranged lunatic. "I'll give you half an hour. Prepare $2 million in unmarked, non-sequential bills and a fully fueled speedboat. You bring the money alone to the old shipyard in Red Hook, Brooklyn. If you dare call the police or bring a single extra person, I'll shred her face. The video cut off. I threw the phone aside and used medical bandages to wrap my injured right hand, layer by layer, until my palm stopped bleeding. Brother. I looked at Bradley sitting across from me. Let me go alone. Bradley furrowed his brows tightly. Chloe, these people are desperate fugitives. It's too dangerous for you to go alone. She owes me this. I pulled a custom silver Browning pistol from my holster, expertly pulling the slide to chamber around. The sharp metallic clack echoed in the cabin. I'm going to personally crush her bones. The old shipyard in Red Hook. The air was filled with the rotting smell of seawater, motor oil, and rust. Strong winds blew sand and gravel, hitting the abandoned shipping containers with dull thuds. Carrying a black duffel bag, my tactical boots clicked against the ground as I walked deliberately into the cavernous interior of the warehouse. Peyton was on a rusted iron catwalk on the second floor, flanked by 4 burly thugs wearing masks and holding sawed-off shotguns. Piper was tied to a pillar at the edge of the catwalk. A slight movement could send her falling 30 feet to the ground. Seeing me walk in alone, Peyton let out a piercing laugh that echoed gratingly through the empty warehouse. Chloe, you actually came? Peyton trembled with excitement, pointing the tip of her blade at the bag in my hand. Where is the money? Throw it up here. I stopped my steps, looking at her coldly. I let go of the handle. The bag hit the dust-covered concrete floor with a heavy thud. The zipper burst open, revealing stacks of blue $100 bills. The thugs' eyes instantly lit up. Their greedy gazes locked onto the bag. The money is here. I raised my chin slightly, my voice cutting through the howling sea breeze, reaching everyone's ears clearly. Let the child go. Peyton swallowed greedily, but the venom in her eyes grew even stronger. She grabbed Piper by the hair, pressing the blade of the box cutter right against Piper's jugular vein. Let her go in your dreams. Peyton's face twisted with extreme envy and madness. What do you want? I asked, my eyes calm as if looking at a corpse saying its final goodbyes. Kneel, Peyton shouted hoarsely. Get on your knees and crawl to me right now. Beg. Say that you, Chloe Sterling, are an absolute idiot. For every time you bang your head, I'll make a cut on her face until it's shredded. I want you to look at this ugly freak for the rest of your life and live in eternal regret. Piper shook her head desperately, whimpering, trying to break free. The blade pressed against her neck drew a thin line of blood. My gaze landed on that red stain. That was the absolute last straw. I let out a soft sigh. My long, pale fingers rested on the buttons of my overcoat, slowly unbuttoning the black coat and letting it fall to the floor. Peyton, the biggest mistake you made in this life wasn't conspiring against Damon. I looked up. There was no anger in my eyes, only the absolute indifference of looking at a dead object. It was thinking you could use the petty tricks of a scorned housewife to blackmail me. The exact second my words fell, a blinding red laser beam shot straight through the broken roof of the warehouse, locking perfectly onto the center of Peyton's forehead. Immediately following, 5, more than a dozen red laser crosshairs wove an airtight web of death, instantly locking onto the foreheads, hearts, and armed wrists of every single thug on the catwalk. The greed on the thugs' faces froze instantly, replaced by a soul-deep terror. They realized in horror that in the face of this absolute suppression, their makeshift shotguns were like children's toys. Bang! A muffled sniper rifle shot tore through the wind. Before Peyton could react, the wrist of her right hand holding the box cutter exploded into a mist of blood. The excruciating agony of shattered bones made her let out a sharp squeal. The box cutter fell to the floor. Simultaneously, the shattered glass windows all over the warehouse burst violently inward. Dozens of elite Sterling family agents, dressed in black tactical gear, wearing night vision goggles and holding submachine guns, descended into the warehouse on ropes from all directions like ghosts rising from hell. The synchronized sound of their combat boots hitting the metal and concrete carried a suffocating pressure. In less than 3 seconds, the 4 thugs had their jaws smashed by rifle butts and were pinned to the ground, the cold barrels of the guns shoved directly into their mouths. Peyton, clutching her severed wrist, collapsed in a pool of blood. She looked in absolute terror at those heavily armed killing machines surrounding her, and then looked at me, standing in the center of the warehouse without a single hair out of place. Who exactly are you? Peyton's teeth chattered, cold sweat mixed with blood dripping down her face. She finally realized that the person she had provoked wasn't a divorced, destitute housewife, but a living Grim Reaper capable of mobilizing military-grade forces at will. I walked up the rusted metal stairs step by step. The clinking of my boots against the iron plates sounded like the countdown to death. I walked over to Piper and cut the ropes binding her. An agent immediately stepped forward, carefully picking Piper up and taking her off the platform. On the edge of the catwalk, only the paralyzed Peyton and I remained. I bent down and picked up the blood-stained box cutter. I told you a minute ago. I crouched down in front of Peyton, squeezing her chin, forcing her to look at me. The cold gleam of the blade reflected in her despair-filled pupils. I'm going to personally crush your bones. The cold blade slid slowly against Peyton's swollen cheek. The distinct chill of the metal made every hair on her body stand up. A harsh, gasping breath tore through her throat. Don't kill me. Please don't kill me. I don't want the money. You can keep it all. I'll leave New York right now and never appear in front of you again. Ignoring the excruciating pain in her wrist, Peyton used her remaining left hand to desperately scratch the rough concrete, wriggling backward like a worm, trying to dodge the blade that could slit her jugular at any second. I looked down at that face, completely distorted by fear, and suddenly felt incredibly bored. With a flick of the blade, the box cutter sliced the red cord around her neck. A white jade pendant blackened by smoke slipped from her collar and hit the pool of blood. You wore this jade for 5 years. It doesn't burn. I used the tip of the blade to push the pendant a little further away. My eyes icy. 5 years ago, in the car crash and fire on the mountain road, you ripped this pendant from my unconscious body. You took it to Damon and falsely claimed the identity of his savior. For 5 years, you enjoyed the glory that should have been mine. You spent the Vance family's money, ordered their servants around, and even stepped on my head to show off. Peyton's pupils dilated massively, looking at me as if she had seen a ghost. How do you know? You were clearly in a deep coma back then. If you don't want anyone to know, don't do it. I casually tossed the box cutter into a rusted iron barrel. It landed with a dull, echoing clink. Killing you dirties my hands. There is a much more appropriate place for you to spend the rest of your life. Just as I spoke, police sirens echoed from outside the warehouse. Red and blue strobe lights tore through the gloomy night. More than a dozen police cruisers pulled into the empty yard of the old shipyard, surrounding the abandoned building tightly. The second brother, Richard Sterling, wearing a flawless black overcoat and shiny leather shoes, walked into the warehouse surrounded by a group of detectives. He pushed up his gold-rimmed glasses, the lenses emitting a cold, strict light. Mr. Sterling, the chief detective, nodded slightly to Richard, then waved his hand. Several officers immediately stepped forward, pulling out handcuffs. Miss Peyton Pierce. Richard walked up to Peyton, pulling an arrest warrant stamped with a bright red official seal from his briefcase and opening it right in front of her eyes. You are suspected of orchestrating the arson case 5 years ago, embezzling $10 million in assets from Vance Enterprises, forging documents, money laundering, and today's vicious case of armed attempted kidnapping. With these 4 major felonies combined, I guarantee you will rot in prison. Furthermore, all your illicit assets have been frozen. Your offshore contacts were arrested by the FBI half an hour ago. Peyton's psychological defenses collapsed completely in that moment. Looking at the black and white arrest warrant, she let out a blood-curdling howl, struggling desperately, refusing to let the police put the handcuffs on her. No. I don't want to go to jail. I'm Damon Vance's woman. You can't arrest me. The chief detective gave a cold order. 2 officers grabbed Peyton by the arms and dragged her out of the warehouse like a bag of garbage. As she passed me, she tried to fix her venomous glare on me, but a Sterling agent beside her kicked her hard in the back of the knee, forcing her to fall heavily before being shoved into the police transport van. As the sirens faded into the distance, the warehouse returned to peace. Are you hurt? Richard put away the arrest warrant and approached, his eyes scanning the bandage on my right hand, his eyebrows furrowing slightly. I'm fine, just a scratch. I shook my head, turning to look at Piper, who was being held securely by an agent. Though terrified, the little girl had calmed down upon seeing me and was now resting obediently on the agent's shoulder. Just as we prepared to evacuate, a black Bentley with a dented front bumper drove crazily into the warehouse yard. With an ear-piercing screech of brakes, it stopped less than 30 feet from us. The door was violently pushed open from the inside. Damon stumbled out of the car. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket. His white shirt was covered in dust and mud. His hair was a complete disaster. He had tracked Peyton here using a GPS tracker hidden in the suitcase full of cash, but he never expected to come face-to-face with a military formation from the Sterling family. He stood frozen in place. His gaze swept over the heavily armed shadow guards bearing the Sterling family crest on their chests, past the heavy helicopter parked nearby, and finally locked onto Piper, who was protected in the center by Richard and me. Chloe. Piper. Damon's Adam's apple bobbed violently. His cracked lips trembled, the sound coming from his throat raspy. He stumbled a step forward, wanting to approach. Click! The synchronized sound of dozens of assault rifles being cocked echoed through the night sky. Dozens of black barrels pivoted instantly, pointing directly at Damon's head. If he dared take even half a step forward, he would be turned into a sieve. Damon's steps halted. He looked at me. Those eyes that used to show arrogance and disdain now overflowed with a profound terror and disbelief. Who exactly are you? Why do they call you Miss Sterling? Damon's voice trembled. Even though he was a fool, having climbed the corporate world in New York for so many years, it was impossible for him not to recognize the crest of the powerful Sterling family. Richard sneered, taking a step forward to block me. Mr. Vance, let us reintroduce ourselves. Standing in front of you is the sole heiress of the Sterling family, the true pearl of the Sterling dynasty. She is also the anonymous investor who single-handedly orchestrated the capital merger 5 years ago that pulled Vance Enterprises back from the brink of bankruptcy. That sentence was like a lightning bolt striking directly into Damon's skull. His proud business empire, the confidence that made him think he controlled everything, turned into a massive joke. In this instant, it turned out that the top-tier resources he had tried so hard to reach were sleeping on the pillow right next to him the whole time. It turned out that the weak housewife he thought couldn't survive without him was the true power broker who could crush Vance Enterprises with the snap of her fingers. Impossible. That's impossible. Damon grabbed his head, his legs gave out, and he fell heavily to his knees on the coarse gravel. The sharp stones pierced his suit pants, blood trickling from his knees, but he seemed unable to feel the pain. Chloe, you lied to me. Why did you lie to me? If you had told me your identity earlier, how could I? How could I have degraded you for someone like Peyton? I pushed past Richard's shoulder and walked slowly, stopping 3 steps away from Damon. I looked down at him. Damon, you truly disgust me. Even now, you're still measuring everything with money and power. If you had known my identity, you would wag your tail, begging for mercy like a dog, putting me on a pedestal. But that wouldn't be love. That would be sickening flattery. I pulled a fire-damaged, deformed black velvet box from the pocket of my overcoat. I had just found it inside Peyton's scattered suitcase when I had the guards sweep the scene. Didn't you keep saying all this time that Peyton was your savior? Didn't you beat your own wife and daughter nearly to death just to repay her? I held the box, my voice devoid of any warmth. Damon, open your damn eyes. And look closely. Who was it that dragged you out of that exploding car? I threw the box hard against his face. The box popped open, and a blackened silver ring with melted edges rolled out, stopping right next to Damon's knee. Damon looked at the ring. Although the inside of the ring had been scorched by extreme heat, 2 sets of initials could still be clearly distinguished. CS and DV. Chloe Sterling, Damon Vance. This was a pair of simple silver rings I had polished myself in an old silversmith shop in the city before we got married. The matching men's ring had been thrown into the back of his drawer because he claimed it didn't match the image of a CEO, and he never wore it again. But this women's ring I had treated as a priceless treasure, wearing it on my left ring finger at all times until that fire 5 years ago. Damon began to tremble violently. He reached out, shaking as if touching red-hot iron, to pick up the ring. The fragmented memories of that fire acted like razor blades caught in a hurricane, frantically slashing through his brain. The burning wreckage of the car, the heavy smell of gasoline, the crushed doors pinning his legs. He remembered struggling in despair inside the car, the flames licking his clothes. Just as his consciousness was about to fade, in the last second, a pair of slender yet blood-covered hands desperately grabbed the burning car doorframe, forcefully dragging him back from the brink of death. He remembered that as the woman held him and rolled down the slope, her back slammed heavily against a burning beam. He remembered the acrid smell of burning flesh. When he woke up, the person sitting next to his bed crying profusely was Peyton. Peyton held the jade pendant picked up at the scene, pointed to the fake burn marks on her thigh, and naturally became his savior. Chloe. Damon raised his head sharply, his bloodshot eyes staring at me. Tears broke the dam instantly. He finally understood why. During our 5 years of marriage, my back would break out in cold sweat on rainy days, hurting so much I couldn't stand straight. He finally understood why, when I took off my clothes, there was a massive, horrifying burn scar on my back that even skin grafts couldn't fully remove. That leather whip in your hand in the cellar struck the exact spine that was once crushed by a burning beam to protect you. I stated this fact calmly, as if speaking of a trivial matter that had nothing to do with me. 30 lashes. The first 10 beat away our affection. The 20th beat away any gratitude. The 30th took half my life. Damon, I bent down slightly, looking at his face, which was contorting in extreme agony. You personally strung up the greatest benefactor in your life and whipped her until she was dripping blood. Does it feel good to bite the hand that saved you? A sharp, desperate scream tore through Damon's throat, sounding like an animal screaming blood. He punched his own chest madly with both fists, as if trying to rip out the heart that had already been soaked in the poison of remorse. He fell face first onto the ground and crawled, banging his head heavily against the hard gravel soil. Thud, thud, thud. The sound of his forehead hitting the ground was dull and terrifying. Blood streamed down his cheeks, mixing with the dirt. Chloe, I was wrong. I'm an animal. I was blind. Beat me. Take a knife and kill me. He crawled toward me like a dying dog, reaching out a hand covered in mud and blood, trying to grab the hem of my coat. A shadow guard immediately stepped forward, his combat boot stepping mercilessly on Damon's hand, crushing his fingers into the gravel. Damon let out a muffled grunt of pain, but his eyes remained fixed on me. His gaze was filled with a sickening, pathetic pleading. Please, for Piper, give me one more chance. I'll repay you with my life. I'll be your slave. I looked down at this once unbearably arrogant man. My heart didn't even produce the slightest ripple. I had given up on him entirely. Damon, those 30 lashes already settled our accounts. I slowly stood up, letting the night wind sway my overcoat. From this moment on, whether you live or die, whether you beg on the streets or jump off a building to apologize to the world, it has nothing to do with me. I turned and walked toward the helicopter. Second brother, I leave this to you. Don't worry. Richard adjusted his glasses, the lenses shining with cold light. Before the sun rises tomorrow, I don't want to see a single intact brick of his company. After the bankruptcy liquidation, I'll make sure he's loaded with enough massive debt to pay for 3 lifetimes. The overpasses of New York will be his only home for the rest of his life. The massive rotors began to roar, kicking up strong winds and dust. I walked up the helicopter ramp, took Piper from the agent's arms, and held her tightly against me. As the helicopter ascended slowly, the wind from the takeoff knocked Damon into the dirt. Through the cabin window, I saw Damon on his knees in the mud, reaching his hands desperately toward the sky, his mouth still screaming my name with all his might, but his voice was completely shredded by the roar of the engines, never reaching my ears again. The night view of Brooklyn and then Manhattan gradually shrank below us. Those 4 walls that once trapped me, the hypocritical compromises, and the endurance were all left behind in the cold darkness of the night. I bent down and gently kissed the bandaged wound on Piper's forehead. Mommy, where are we going? Piper hugged my neck, asking with her sweet voice. I looked out the window. Above the clouds, a bright, immaculate moon was breaking through the gloom, casting a cold and free light. We're going home. A relieved smile appeared on my lips. To live our own lives. Unauthorized personnel, step back. An official from the bankruptcy court waved his hand expressionlessly. 2 officers grabbed Damon by the arms, dragging him out of the cast-iron gates of the mansion. The biting winter wind, mixed with freezing rain, viciously whipped Damon's thin shirt. He stumbled and fell onto the icy asphalt, his palms scraped and bleeding from the rough gravel. The 2 carved doors closed mercilessly in his face. With the click of the lock, the last shred of dignity belonging to Damon Vance, once an influential billionaire, was completely stripped away. In just half a month, Vance Enterprises went from a giant on the verge of a nicey IPO to a corporate corpse totally devoured by various capital vultures. Bradley's stock dump and cutting the capital chain were only the first step. Following that, Richard submitted a 1,000-page dossier of irrefutable evidence detailing financial fraud and tax evasion. The IRS moved in entirely to audit the books. All real estate, stocks, and offshore funds under the Vance name were completely frozen and auctioned off. To fill that massive financial hole, Damon not only lost everything, but also became personally liable for $3 billion in joint debts. He became a rat running through the streets, an insolvent debtor everyone wanted to kick. Lying on the freezing ground, Damon tremblingly pulled a cheap disposable burner phone from his pocket. It was the only thing of value he had left. He scrolled through the contacts, dialing the numbers of the people he used to call brothers at gala parties. Sorry, the number dialed is busy. Damon, are you crazy? You dare call me? Afraid the Sterling family won't find out we knew each other? Get out of here. Hey, if you want to beg for food, go to the subway grates in the Bronx. Don't dirty my caller ID. The dial tones acted like venomous thorns, stabbing his bullet-riddled heart. He finally accepted reality. In this game of absolute power, no one dared throw him even a strand of straw. The Sterling family didn't even need to use low tactics. Simply cutting Vance's oxygen tube was enough to suffocate him to death. Freezing rain began to fall. Damon pulled his torn shirt tighter. Like a soulless zombie, he dragged his numb legs step by step toward the Sterling family's hidden estate in the Catskills. From the city limits to the mountain estate was a grueling 60 miles. He had no money for transport. He could only measure the distance with his feet. The soles of his shoes wore completely through, leaving his toes bloody and leaving a trail of glaring red marks in the thin snow that was beginning to fall in the mountains. For 3 days and 3 nights, Damon kneeled like a stray dog before the black and gold cast-iron gates of the Sterling estate. He didn't dare shout loudly. He could only grip the freezing iron bars tightly with both hands, banging his forehead repeatedly against the pavement, mechanically repeating a hollow plea. "Let me see Chloe. Please. Just let me tell Chloe I'm sorry." Rainwater mixed with blood blurred his vision. Hunger, cold, and a high fever were constantly devouring his life force, but he didn't dare collapse. His only obsession was to see the woman he had personally driven away just one more time. On the morning of the 4th day, the heavy gates finally slid open slowly with the deep hum of mechanical bearings. A flash of ecstatic joy instantly exploded in Damon's hollow eyes. He struggled to stand up, but his legs were so frozen and stiff that he fell heavily into the mud. It wasn't Chloe who came out. The 3 Sterling brothers, wearing dark overcoats, stood like insurmountable mountains, blocking all the light from inside the estate. The eldest, Bradley, looked down at the pile of mud on the ground. There was no contempt in his black pupils, only an absolute indifference, as if looking at air. "Mr. Sterling, brother, please let me see Chloe." Damon reached out, trying to grab the pant leg of Bradley, like a drowning man grabbing a lifeline. A security guard immediately stepped forward, his combat boot mercilessly pinning Damon's hand to the ground. "Don't use that title. It disgusts my sister." Bradley's tone was flat, but it carried a bone-chilling frost. "Damon Vance, you've been kneeling here for 3 days. You're just trying to move yourself. Do you really think that if you act pathetic enough, it will buy you forgiveness?" Richard pushed up his glasses and threw a copy of a court verdict in front of Damon. Peyton's case was sentenced today, 15 years in federal prison. In court, she cried and pushed all the blame onto you, saying she only embezzled the money under your instructions. Damon, the true love you gave half your life to protect acted worse than a dog in front of the judge. Damon trembled violently, his gaze locked on the verdict. A sound resembling the final gasp of a beast tore through his throat. "Do you know what Chloe has been doing these past 3 days?" Hunter, the 3rd brother, casually spun a cigar cutter in his hand. "She's been preparing a presentation for international investors, picking out bilingual schools for Piper, and trying on gala dresses flown straight in from Paris. She hasn't asked a single time if there's a dog named Damon Vance kneeling outside the gates." Those words were more fatal than any physical blow. Damon always thought that Chloe hated him deeply, and that was why she used all the Sterling family's resources to destroy him. If there was hate, it meant she still cared. But now he finally understood. When Chloe said their accounts were settled that night at the shipyard, she really meant settled. She stripped him of everything he owned, and then erased him completely from her life. He wasn't fit to be her lover, and he didn't even qualify to be her enemy. "Get out of here!" Bradley turned around, feeling that giving him a second look was redundant. "If I hear your shadow on this road tomorrow morning, I won't care if New York has one more homeless man dead in a traffic accident." The gates slammed shut once more. Damon collapsed into the mud, his gaze crossing the high walls, looking toward the wide windows of the main mansion. Through the fine rain, he faintly saw a familiar figure standing on the second-floor balcony. Chloe wore comfortable cashmere clothes, her long hair casually tied up, holding a steaming cup of tea. She looked down at the gates. Her gaze was so calm, as if looking at a dead leaf falling. Without stopping for even half a second, she turned and walked back into the warmth of the room. That single, indifferent look completely drained the last drop of warmth from Damon's veins. He finally broke, howling in total despair. His hands dug into the dirt, his nails bending and breaking. Remorse turned into a sharp blade, slicing his soul alive. He originally could have had the purest love in this world, the most perfect family. Yet, he personally tore it all to pieces and threw it in the gutter. 1 year later, at a corporate gala at the top of a Manhattan skyscraper overlooking the city, massive crystal chandeliers cast a dazzling glow. The hall was filled with the rustle of expensive gowns and the clinking of glasses, gathering the top predators of the financial world and business elites. I wore a midnight blue haute couture evening gown, impeccably tailored. Holding a flute of champagne, I was surrounded by several Wall Street executives, laughing and conversing effortlessly. On the ring finger of my left hand, the mark left by that simple silver ring had long been washed away by time, replaced by an emerald ring symbolizing absolute power. Miss Sterling, the energy merger you spearheaded was a masterclass. Not only did it beat the speculators, but it expanded the Sterling family's portfolio twofold. The CEO of Morgan Bank raised his glass, offering a genuine compliment. I smiled slightly, clinking my glass against his. You flatter me, just following market trends. In the midst of the casual conversation, the executive's topic somehow shifted to New York's recent past. Speaking of which, it really is a shame. Back then, that powerful Vance Enterprises vanished just like that. Out of nowhere, a billionaire shook his head. I was in the Bronx the other day. Guess what? I saw a day laborer carrying bags of rubble who looked exactly like that arrogant CEO, Damon Vance. I hear he carries billions in debt. Not only is he legally barred from any luxury spending, but debt collectors break his legs every other week. A while ago, I heard he was digging through a dumpster for food, fought a stray dog for scraps, got bitten, and caught a disease. Now no one hires him anymore, not even to carry rubble. The crowd sighed, treating it as nothing more than dinner gossip. Miss Sterling, you've been in New York for years. Have you heard anything about this? The billionaire turned and asked me. I swirled the champagne in my glass. The pale golden liquid refracted fragmented light against the glass. In my mind, a brief flash of a bloody leather whip in a dark cellar crossed my memory, followed by the hysteria of that rainy night. Those images were like an old black and white silent film from the last century, long stripped of color and sound. I've never heard of it. I drank the champagne in one gulp and gently placed the empty glass on a passing waiter's tray. My red lips curled into a calm, effortless arc. I don't concern myself with the ultimate fate of trash. A crystal-clear laugh echoed behind me. 6-year-old Piper, wearing a pure white princess dress, ran through the hall like a fairy butterfly and threw herself into my arms. Her forehead was smooth and flawless, leaving no scar whatsoever. Her eyes shone with the purest, most carefree light of a child her age. Mommy, Uncle Bradley said he's going to take me to see the fireworks over the Brooklyn Bridge later. She tilted her head, sharing her joy eagerly. I bent down and picked her up, my fingers gently combing her soft hair, and kissed her rosy cheek. Okay, Mommy will go with you. Carrying my daughter, I turned and walked toward the expansive terrace outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. The night breeze blew against us, bringing the scent of true freedom. Massive fireworks exploded in the night sky, illuminating the city in a brilliant display of colors. That night, the last shadow that lingered in the marrow of my bones finally vanished with the wind. This kind of life was what it truly meant to be free.